Hey friends, this is Jay Sexton at Sexton Financial Mentoring. We're bringing you episode 4 now of our budgeting series, showing you how to actually start using the budget. Up to now, you should have watched episodes 1 through 3, which show you how to set up the framework of the budget and then fill in things like the savings tab, the debt tab, and the budget tab that you'll work from every single pay period. As we start this process, I'll show you how to set up the pay period, how to populate all of that data in there, how to set up formulas so that you're not doing calculations manually over and over. We use a lot of color schemes so that it's visually. You have a lot of visual cues that you can work from, so you can see things that are already paid, things that are already reconciled, things that have automatic payments, and things like that. I use a lot of color coding and visual cues to let me know what exactly is going on with my budget. So in this video, we'll look at setting up the first pay period. We'll end the video setting up the second pay period, but only to carry forward those budget bucket items, which will hopefully have a balance at the end of each pay period. That's the goal, is to have a balance, but at the very least, don't go over them. And I'll show you how to set up a conditional format for the balance so that if you're green, you're good, and if you're red, something happened that you need to address. So if you have your Excel workbook open, get ready to do the budget, and let's go. We're finally at the stage where we're going to start using the budget on a daily or weekly or however often you prefer to do it basis. I personally am in my budget every single day. It's one of the first things I do in the morning because I really like to look ahead. I like to see what's going on with my finances several weeks in advance. I like to know on a daily or even several times a day basis what's going on. Some people do this for the week. They don't even go back to it until the end of the week, and they do it for the next week. And that's totally your comfort level. That's your call. But I like to be in this every single day. So with your budget workbook open, we are on the checking tab. And you remember we titled this for the whole year. We're going to use one tab will be for the entire year. And in a later video, I'll show you how to add a new year and carry over your balance. You should already have worked through the first 3 episodes. And if you haven't done that yet, I encourage you to go back and do so to show you how to set up the template. We build this Excel workbook from scratch. I show you every step to get to where you need to be to see these things as I'll be doing them in this demonstration. And in the episodes 2 and 3, we populated the savings, debt, and budget tabs to get you ready to start using this. It's not something you can just jump into with no planning and no preparation, and it shouldn't be. Your budget is one of the most powerful tools. Some people would argue the most powerful tool in your household to keep your finances on track. So you shouldn't expect it to be super easy. It takes some work. It's amazing how many hours and how much time people put into planning vacations and picking out a car, which is a big purchase. You should do a lot of research on that, but they spend almost no time working on their budget. So I hope that's not the case with you. And if it is, you're probably going to struggle. You need to put some work into this. So the very first thing is, how do we start? Well, there's 2 methods you can use, and I'll tell you my recommendation. One method you could use is you could just open a new checking account. You could open a brand new checking account, and then you can decide what your opening balance is going to be, and that's where we will start our checking here. Now, you're going to have to make sure you have enough left in your other checking account to pay the bills that'll still be coming out of that until you're not using it anymore. It's kind of inconvenient. That's not the recommended method, in my opinion. What I think is better, and what I did myself, is I took my bank statement for the last reporting period, look at your ending balance on that bank statement, and take that balance and deduct any expenses that have come out or any income. Treat it just like a regular checkbook, like you're balancing your checkbook, up to the date that you start this. And I would recommend starting this on the first day of a pay period just to make it easy. So you're going to take the ending balance of your bank statement, add and subtract anything that is coming in and out of your account from that date up till now, and that's the balance you're going to start with. A little caveat to that: if you've written checks, they may not be there yet. So if you have checks outstanding, you have to know what those are, what the amounts are, and you'll have to account for those as well. And that's I think, a better way to start this. So in our example, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're going to add $1,100. We're going to say that's the amount that we had left over after we reconciled the end of our last bank statement. And we're going to call this previous because that is going to show up. If you remember, if we jump over to blank form, we're going to have a previous. I prefer it to be up there. I'd move it up there. So that's the first thing. That's going to be the ending balance of every previous pay period. That's what you're going to start this with every time. I'm not going to put a date or type in this one because this is the one that we're opening with. So I always fill this in with orange. I'll explain the colors in a later video when I show you how to reconcile this from your bank statements. But we are going to start with $1,100. Now, if you also remember, we added this in the previous example. We added this $50 account pad. And what that is it's an artificial charge that never gets reconciled. You see the note here, do not reconcile this entry ever. It's just a little bit of an account pad to make you think that you have $50 less in your bank than you really do. That way, if you forget a transaction or you get your numbers off a little bit, until you can get that fixed, you at least have a $50 pad. Maybe that's not enough for you. You know, if you're prone to making math mistakes or forgetting to put things in, maybe you want this to be $100. That's totally your call. I usually just recommend people put $50 in there. We're going to do a bit of formatting before we start doing this. I like color schemes. I like the things I can just look at things and I can know from the color what it's telling me. So what we're going to do is a bit of conditional formatting with our balance, and we're going to do this on this checking, but we're also going to do it on our blank form, or you're going to do it on your blank form. And the reason we do that is because when you add a new pay period in here, when we insert a new pay period in here, you want to keep that formatting so you're not doing this every single time. But we're just going to click once on that balance cell so that it's highlighted. We're going to go up here to the top and under conditional formatting, which is in the home tab, you should already be there hopefully. We're going to choose conditional formatting and we're going to say new rule. Under new rule, we're going to choose format only cells that contain, and this should default to cell value, leave it there. And we're going to change this to greater than or equal to. And in this, we're going to put the value 0. Make sure you put the number 0 and not a letter 0 in there. So this rule is going to say that if this cell contains a value that's greater than or equal to 0, we're going to do something with it. So on this format button, click that, and under color, we're going to go down and we're going to make this green. So if this cell contains a value that is 0 or higher, it's going to be green. Why don't I make 0 red? Because it's not negative. You can have a 0 balance. That's risky, but you can have a 0 balance with no penalties. So we keep it green. So we're going to say OK. Now, you're not quite done yet. You can say OK here. You should say OK here. While that's still highlighted down there, you see it turned it green already. You see it turned it green. Actually, let's change something. Go back up there. Let's go to Manage Rule. Click on this one and say Edit, because I meant to make it the background, not the color of the text. So change that back to black. Go up to Fill. I'm sorry about that. On the Fill tab, then click green. Say OK, and say Apply. There we go. That's what I wanted. It makes the highlight, basically, it highlights the cell green. Now, we're going to make another rule. You can't make two rules in the same step. So we already have this rule. We just edited it because I messed it up. Now we're going to say new rule, same choices, format only cells that contain. And now we're going to say less than. And in this box, we're going to say 0 again, the number 0. Format, go over to Fill, should already be on Fill. We're going to make this one red. So this is going to tell us right away if our balance at the end of this pay period is less than 0, it's going to highlight that red. So say OK there and hit Apply. Now we can, and then OK again. We can do a little experimenting. Like I can come up here and I can put 2,000 in this cell. It should change that balance to red. Hit Enter. That's because I didn't make it negative. Put it in parentheses, folks. Accounting format, all deductions are in parentheses. So put your 2,000 in parentheses. Now we have a negative balance and it changed it to red. That immediately tells me if my ending balance at the end of my pay period is red, I got a problem. And I'm going to have to look at that a little closer. So click this, delete. Let's take that back out of there, so we don't want that there. Now we're going to start filling in our pay period based on our budget. Well, the first thing we need to do is identify the date range of our pay period. So I double click in there. I'm going to backspace to get rid of that. I'm just going to make this start this week. So I'm going to say 04/21 2023 through 05/04 2023. Now, if you look on a calendar, you'll notice that that's not Friday to Friday. That's Friday to the Thursday before the next pay period, because the first day of the next pay period, assuming we have 2-week pay periods, will be the 5th. So this goes from the date that we get paid, which is going to be Friday the 21st, through Thursday, May 4th, which is the Thursday right before the next payday begins. The next payday, the next pay period begins. So we've identified that. Now we know the range then of the budget period that we need to account for, 4/21 to 5/4. So if we go down to our budget tab, look, we already did this. We got these all in order. Just to point out a couple things, these ones that I made pink here, I changed those values from the last time when I showed you how to set up the budget, only because it makes it a little cleaner. So I will go back and I will make those black again. But we are looking at the 21st through the 4th. So if you look over here, we've already put everything in order based on the calendar, the first of the month to the last of the month. So I'm only going to be looking at these things here. I'm just going to click and highlight. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you that these are the expenses that we are going to be concerned with. Everything between the 21st and the 4th. So the 10th through the 20th, those aren't going to happen in this pay period. I don't care about those. Now, one thing you might notice on here, we're kind of, our expenses are kind of heavy in this pay period. You know, we have the mortgage, we have the car payment, we have a few of our credit cards, we have one of our utility bills is due. So we're going to be a little heavy in this pay period, and that's okay. As long as you aren't, as long as you're following your budget, it won't be a problem. So we know we're only going to address these. Before we do that, before we put in our scheduled transactions, let's put in our budget buckets. Let's go talk about that real quick. So let's start with our savings rather. So we've identified in our savings previously, we calculated that we needed to have a savings amount of $283.33 every 2 weeks, twice a month. To meet our savings goal. Remember, our savings goal is this amount here. That's our monthly savings goal, and that's tied to this calculation that we did over here, where we know to meet this annual savings amount to address these expenses, we have to have that much each month, and we divided that by 2 and say, okay, that's how much we have to have each pay every 2 weeks. Now, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can just put one line in here and say $283.33. And then when you deposit it in your bank, you can come over here and say, well, I'm going to have this much of it in here and this much of it in here and so forth. You can divide it that way. I really like to separate these here. And again, that's totally your call. I just prefer to do it that way. So I'm going to say 200 of my savings. And again, this is money, even though it's going into my savings, it's still leaving my checking account. So it's going in parentheses because it's a negative value. So I'm taking $200 out for, we're just going to say the emergency fund, because if you remember from before, we didn't have that completely budgeted yet. Now, all of my savings, I always put those, I make those transfers on the last day of the pay period, just because I don't want to accidentally have a low point, because you saw how many of those expenses fall during this pay period. Most of our expenses do. If I wait till the last day of the pay period, I know that I won't accidentally put myself over. So the last day of the pay period is the 4th. And we're going to call this transfer. Transfer is the type of transaction. You'll see as I go the different types of transactions that I use. This doesn't mean anything. It's just a note for you to know what kind of transaction it was. Maybe it was a debit, maybe it was a refund, maybe it was an ACH transaction, maybe it was a deposit. And then the other $83.33, I'm going to put in my property tax fund. And we're also going to do that on the 4th, and that's going to be a transfer as well, because I'm doing that internally. Now, I may or may not have a reserve fund. Let's go back over here before we get too far. In these budget buckets, we have a lot of things. We have, in the savings rather, we have a lot of things. The property tax, which I'm going to put some money in. I'm going to put some money in my emergency fund. You saw me separate those. Down here, we have these reserve funds, and I said that I would explain that, so I'm going to here in just a moment. But for now, let's just put 0, and we'll say reserve funds because we don't know yet if there's going to be anything in there. Now, when we do, if we put something in there, it'll be a transfer, so that's fine. Let's go back to our budget. Let's go ahead and put the income in. I probably should have done that first. I just got ahead of myself because that's what happens when I start yapping. So these are our monthly budget amounts, and we say that we get paid every 2 weeks. So we know that half of that is what we're going to get paid. So our higher paycheck, the one that we're going to get that's a bigger amount, we are going to create our pay periods based on the date of that paycheck. So our bigger one of the two is going to be 13/13/32. We're just going to call that income one. You can say, if you work at whatever, let's say if you work at Blue Cross, you can put Blue Cross there. That means that paycheck is coming from Blue Cross. And that's going to be the 21st. Now that lines up with the first date of this pay period. Remember, I said the bigger income is the one that drives the pay period. You can do this in a couple of different ways, and I'll talk about it in just a second. I'm going to call that a deposit. The second income is 11/23/11. We'll just call it income number 2 here. And I'm going to assume, for the sake of our example family here, that they get paid on opposite weeks. So that paycheck isn't going to hit the account until the 28th. Some people have no problem doing this because some of your expenses will come out between the 21st and the 28th, and the rest of them will come out between the 28th and the 4th. If you can't manage that, there is nothing wrong with doing a pay period for every paycheck. For example, if I wanted to do 4/21 to 4/27 and only do my expenses based on that paycheck, and then my next pay period would be 4/28 to 5/4, it'd be a whole new columns in here. It's perfectly fine to do it that way. This is more reflective of how it's been in my life for a long time, so I'm comfortable with this. So I'm just going to show you how to do it this way. So now we have what we opened the account with, what we carried forward. We have our incomes and the date that we expect to get those. We have what we've identified for our savings, but we're not going to take those out until the very last day of the pay period. And I'll show you again with some color schemes how we know when those things have happened. Let's move on to the budget buckets. The budget buckets are those things, as you can see by the note here, that may carry over if a balance exists. For example, I know that I'm budgeting $800 a month for groceries, so I get $400 every 2 weeks. And I'm just going to change this to black here in just a second. I'm going to make all these black. I know that I get $400 every 2 weeks for that. So that's what I'm going to put in here for groceries. This one, we're just going to track this one. So I'm going to put it in for the first day of the pay period. And I'm going to say track. And I'll show you how we do that, what we do with that when we start looking at our unscheduled transactions. For gas, we had budgeted $400 a month. So half of that means I get $200 for the pay period. And again, we're just tracking these so they can just come out on the first of the month. I'm going to go into a little bit of a rabbit hole here with the utility one and show you how you can do basically a level pay plan of your own. You've probably heard of that with utilities. They charge the same amount every single month, and then you have to level up with them at the end of the year. And most of the time that means you're paying them a big chunk of money at the end of the year because they undercharged you for the whole year. So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. We budgeted $290 a month for utilities. Now, the way we did that, the way we arrived at that figure, and you'll have to do this, is you go back and look at your last 12 months worth of utility bills. And I mean every monthly utility bill for the last 12 months. That'll hit every season. It'll hit every month. And divide that by 12. Add all that up and divide it by 12. And that'll tell you how much per month is your average. Now, it's super hot in the summer. And if you have electric air conditioner, your electric bill's real high. And it's super cold in the winter and you have a gas furnace, your gas bill's real high. And so the spring and the fall, maybe you just have the windows open for several weeks and your utility bills go down. So even though you have an average $290 a month, it's rarely going to be $290. It's going to be higher some months and lower in other months. So I'm going to tell you how to build your own level pay here. What I would suggest you do is take that $290 and let's pull up a calculator here, $290. And we're going to say times 1.15. That means I'm adding 15% to my average. That's $333.50. I'm just gonna take that down to $330. We're gonna say it's $330 a month is what we want to work with. So I'm going to say $330 a month for this. Now, just play along because it's going to make sense later. What we're going to do with the extra then, let's say in 1 month, we expect that our utility bills going to be a lot lower than that. It's spring right now. This is April I'm looking at. So our utility bill is probably going to be a lot less than $330. But what we'll do is we'll account for $330 here. And we'll say that's our utilities. And it's just track. So it's at the first of the pay period. What'll happen then is let's say my utilities come out to be $300 instead of $330. I'm going to take that extra $30 and I'm going to put it in this reserve fund. And when I add that to my savings, that reserve fund is going to be $30 in the utility category. That way, when I get to the summer months and maybe my utility bill is $350, I can still budget $330 because it's easier to budget the same amount every single month rather than going up and down. But let's say in the summer, my utility bill total is $350. Well, you go, oh, you don't have enough. You have $20 less than what you need. So what happens on those months is then I'm going to come back here. I'm going to take $20 out of my reserve fund to add to that to account for those more expensive months. What you'll usually find, that 15% for the most part will let you build some reserve fund. Now, if you're starting this we're lucky we're starting it in the spring. If you're starting this in the summer or the winter, you may not have enough starting with your 15%. You may actually have to make up a little bit of that on your own, but don't go higher than 15%. Stick with 15%. If you're starting in the fall or spring, like we are here in our example, you're probably going to build up a little bit before you get to summer. And then what happens is over time, you'll probably build up some money in here. And then what I'll use this for, let's say the air conditioner breaks down, and it's July and I'm in the Midwest, so it's going to be miserable. I will use some of that reserve fund to repair what would be a utility device. Same with vehicle maintenance. If I have gas left over and I put it in here, when I get my oil change, I take it out of here. Those are those uneven recurring expenses that I really love to use the reserve funds for. Now, if that was a little cloudy in my explanation, don't try to understand it perfectly right now. In future videos, as we add pay periods and we come across those situations, you'll see how I incorporate that in there. But for today, for starting out, take your average last 12 months monthly utility cost, add 15% by multiplying that by 1.15. That then is your monthly utility budget. That's your new monthly utility budget. So that's what we're going to put in here in our budget bucket. Grooming, we're going to say that we do grooming, but it's not going to be due this pay period, so we're not going to put it in there. Now, that took care of our income, our savings, and our budget buckets based off of these figures that we've calculated. Now we need to start looking at filling in the scheduled transactions. Remember, scheduled transactions are all of those monthly things that you need to account for that you know the date that they're going to get paid on. And we did that already by putting them all in here. We came in here and we said, okay, it's going to be all of these that land between the 1st and the 4th. So the first one then, and I like to highlight these just so it's easy to catch my eye when I'm coming back to it. The first one then is actually the visa that occurs on the 22nd. It's $140. So right here, I'm going to say $140 in parentheses because it's an expense. My visa is going to be due on the 22nd, and that's an ACH transaction, meaning it's not a debit. It's something I set up with Visa online. When I pay it, it comes directly out of my checking account as an ACH transaction. If you pay it another way, if you send a check, then what I would do if you send a check is I would put the check number here. Let's say it's 1578. That's the check number. One of the nice things then is if you want to go and search this, you can search for that check number. You can search for the name of the transaction. You can search for the amount of the transaction. It's a nice benefit of having this in Excel. Let's go. Our next transaction then is on the 23rd. That's for our internet and cable for 116. So I'm going to say 116 internet/cable. And that happened on the 23rd, and that's also ACH. Now, notice something happened over here. This did not look like this. I put it in parentheses, but it came up with a negative sign. And if you notice, if I click on there, it says general up here. Sometimes when you add when you add rows in Excel, it just goes back to a default format. So make sure when you see something goofy like that, just go up here and see what the formatting is. It's easy to change it back. Just expand that and hit accounting, and it'll put it right back the way it's supposed to be for you. This also landed over here for some reason. You just have to pay attention to those things, and when you see them, and that's clicking over there for some reason. There we go. So you'll see that, and that was on the same row. So at some point I probably added this row and I just didn't check the formatting, because the next one, and if you scroll down, these all are accounting, and that's the way they're supposed to be. So if you catch something like that, it's a pretty easy fix. After internet and cable, we have one of our utility bills. Now I separated these because I'm going to say that we have two different companies we're paying. One of them is gas, it gets paid on the 15th, and the other one's water and electric, it gets paid on the 26th. So let's say that our water and electric bill is $210 on the 26th. So we're just going to say utilities, water, and electric. And that's on the 26th. And we're going to say that's also an ACH. The next scheduled transaction after that then is phones, cell phones, we assume, $94. And that was on the 27th, I think. Yep. So we're going to go up here. We're going to say $94, and I'm just going to say AT&T. That's not an endorsement of AT&T. I'm going to do something here. I'm going to put a star here. I'll explain that in just a second. We said that was a 27th, and that's going to be an ACH. Anything that you have on an automatic payment that you don't have to actually go out and set up the payment for example, Visa, I'm going to have to actually go to the website, schedule the payment, and my internet and cable, I'm going to assume that I have to go and manually schedule that as well. Same for this. But AT&T, we're going to say this is automatic. I've set it up to be automatic every month. I don't have to go in and do anything. I just have to know what the amount is. So I put a little asterisk next to anything that is an automatic payment. Again, gives me a visual cue to know that I don't actually have to go and do anything with that. It's already going to come out. After the phones, then, we had a student loan. Nelnet was $150, and that's on the 30th. So that's Nelnet. I can tell you right now that Nelnet is going to be automatic because in most cases they require that. And that was on the 30th. That's an ACH. Now, if we go back over here, the next thing really is the unexpected expenses. We don't ever put that in there. We never put that in there in our actual pay period over here. It's only in our budget so that we have, again, a little pad here. If I took that out, that would bump that up to $132. I don't want to bump it up. I want to leave it there for little unexpected things that I may have forgotten about. Now, here we go. After the 30th, we have to go back up here because our pay period goes to the 4th. We have a big one here. The mortgage on the 1st is $1,200. Ooh, $1,200 on the 1st. That's our mortgage. You're probably going to put the bank's name in here. I'm going to say that that's also an automatic payment, which is pretty popular with most banks. And that's an ACH transaction. Then the next thing is we go up here and we have the last thing is our car payment, which is $360 on the 3rd. So we have $360 car payment. You're just going to put probably whatever bank that is. Probably is also an automatic payment, and that was on the 3rd ACH. Now we don't have any more. That was the last before the end of the pay period. But we have an extra line here. You can leave it in or you can take it out. I like to take them out. So I would highlight that whole row, right click and delete. I would do the same for these because I just don't like a lot of extra space in there. It's totally my preference. You do not have to do that. I like to keep it pretty clean like that. So now we have all of our scheduled transactions. We've gotten everything completed for our budget bucket. We don't know our reserve funds yet, but I'm going to show you what's going to happen at the end of this pay period. Woo, we still have $3.10 left. We made it. Now you're like, wow, that's not very good. Well, if you look at the next pay period is only these expenses. They don't amount to much. I'm going to show you something in Excel though. If you actually select that whole range of values there, and you look down here at the bottom, it gives you the sum and the average. Excel just automatically does that for you. So my next pay period, all of my expenses are only $533. That's why I'm saying sometimes you'll have an uneven distribution of your expenses for the month, and that's pretty normal. Okay, so we're going to work with our budget buckets now, but before we do that, I'm going to show you just a little bit more of how I use the highlighting to always remind me what's going on, what's already been addressed, what still needs to be addressed. If you remember up here where I had this previous balance, that's what we used to start our account here. I highlighted that in orange. Orange for me means it's already reconciled. Now you'll never have to reconcile a previous balance, even on future pay periods, because that's not ever going to show up on your bank statement. But when I reconcile from my bank statement, those transactions are going to be turned orange. I'll never have to touch those again. But things that I need to pay attention to now. So, for example, this first paycheck, it was supposed to happen on the first day of this pay period. I'll go into my bank app or whatever and look and verify that it was that amount. Now, maybe you work some overtime or something and it's more than that. So you might have to adjust that. But from what we budgeted, it should be that amount. So I go in there, I verified, yes, I got paid that amount. So I'm going to highlight this one in this brighter yellow. That tells me that that transaction has already taken place. It's done. So down here, remember, I had these transactions that were scheduled that I put this asterisk next to tell me that those are automatic payments. I don't have to go in and actually do anything with those. So I'm going to highlight those also. That means that those are already paid or they're scheduled to be paid. I don't have to go do anything. Now, these other ones are not highlighted. So I know that, hey, I have to go in and schedule that payment. And I have to go schedule that payment. I have to go schedule that one and so forth. So those we only highlight after a transaction has either happened or it's scheduled to happen. So that tells you that you don't have to address those anymore. So now we move on to our budget buckets. But the first budget bucket item you probably already caught, and you're thinking, why aren't we addressing this? Because this doesn't make sense. We budgeted $333 this pay period or this month for utilities, but we already have a $210 bill down here. Well, that's why we call this a budget bucket. We're going to take out whatever we need for that payment. So if we have a $210 utility bill and we have a $333 in our budget, that means we have $120 left over. So I'm going to take 210 out of that, and that's going to leave me with 120. So now you go, oh boy, I've got some extra money down here now. Well, not really. Don't get excited yet, because remember, these carry over if a balance exists. So when we do our next pay period, which I'll show you in this video, we will actually carry these over. So don't get excited about that extra balance. And that's why I like to do look ahead pay periods. I like to see them out in advance so I know exactly, is this what I really have, or is this just, teasing me because I haven't adjusted for these budget buckets? And that's the case with this. So your first utility bill is $210. You have $120 now for that gas bill, which won't happen until the 15th based on our example, which will be in the next pay period. So we'll show you how to do that when we get to that point. We're going to do the same thing for groceries and gas. These are buckets. So as we use money out of those buckets, we'll deduct it each time we use something. So let's just get started. This is day one. We went and checked our bank and we saw, oh good, we got paid what we were supposed to get paid. So I highlighted that because that's a done deal. This one I won't highlight because it doesn't happen until next week, the next income. These are automatically scheduled payments, so I can highlight those. Now I'm ready to start shopping. So this is a Friday. So now Saturday, the 22nd rolls around. I got to go buy some groceries. So I went to Hy-Vee and I spent $137.92 Hy-Vee. That was on the 22nd, and let's say I use my debit card for that. So I'm going to create that as a debit. Well, you can see it's deducting. Our balance should be going down, and it is. And after I went shopping, I decided I deserved a reward for going grocery shopping. So I went to McDonald's. So that also happened on the 22nd. That one was also probably a debit. So now I have a choice to make. I know this is groceries. This isn't a grocery amount, but is McDonald's groceries? Well, that's up to you. If you want to create another category, another budget bucket for miscellaneous or uncategorized or something like that, that's totally your call. Just don't sacrifice, making extra payments on your credit cards and savings and things like that so you can have throwaway money. You don't ever want to do that. Some people just say, you know what, that's groceries. That's groceries / household. And that's fine. If you want to do it that way, that's fine. Let's say that's the only shopping we did that day. So we have these two expenses. Now, again, remember, if you highlight both of those, Excel automatically totals them for you. So if I look down here at the bottom, it says $147.45. That's the total for both of those. I don't have to do that. I can just do these individually. So I'm going to pull up a calculator. And I'm going to say, I started with a grocery budget of $400 for this pay period. It's $800 a month. So for this pay period, it's $400. And I've already spent 147.45, which leaves me with 252.55. 252.55. So I'm going to come up here and change this to 252.55. I have that much left in my bucket for groceries for the rest of this pay period. I've spent that much. I had to take that much out of my bucket. So these budget buckets literally are buckets of money for those categories. And when you take money out and account for it down here, you have to deduct it from up here. If you don't deduct it from up here, your balance is going to be way off because you're never actually taking out of your account if you don't do that. So then that was Saturday. Didn't have to buy anything else. Well, Sunday's coming along. I have to go work this week, so I'm going to have to go buy and get some gas. So let's say I go to BP and I fill my tank. It's $52. That was on Sunday the 23rd. Yeah, that was a debit again. Oh, I also want to highlight these because I know those transactions took place. Well, BP took place also. I got home. I took the receipt out of my wallet. I came to my office and sat down in front of my budget and I said, here's my receipt for BP. Take it out of my budget, highlight it because that transaction happened. Now I'm going to go up here and get my calculator again. I'm going to say, okay, I started with $200 for gas and I spent 52 at BP. So I have $148 left in my bucket this month, or this pay period rather, for gas, 148. See how that works? I used gas money. I had to take it out of the bucket. I used grocery money. I took it out of the bucket. Now, some people like me will do their receipts every single day. As soon as I get home, like I said, I do my budget first thing in the morning, but when I get home, if I had to stop anywhere and I have a receipt for something, or if I have an app and the receipts in my app, I check that too. For example, like Sam's and a couple other places just give you a receipt in your app. I'll come in here and I'll do those every single day so I don't forget. Some people just do this once a week. They'll get a little box in the kitchen and put all the receipts in it for the whole week. At the end of the week, they'll come in here and they'll do all their accounting. And that's your call. I'm not telling you one way is better than the other. I just can't let it go for a week. Now you'll see we're kind of running short on space here, so I'm going to add some rows. So if I click, hold the whole row and drag it down, I'm just highlighting, and then I'm going to right click and say insert, and that's going to add a bunch of rows for me. Now you see it also kept this formatting. You kept the highlighting. I don't want that. So before you click anywhere else while this is all highlighted, go up here and say no fill because I don't want that highlighted yet. I also want to go in here and I'm going to check each one of these boxes to make sure they're still accounting, and they are. I also, this is just how I am. I'm a little OCD about this. I'm going to double click on here and make sure my range is still going to capture everything, and it does. So we're good. Okay, so I've got groceries for the weekend. I got some gas. Didn't really have a lot going on this week, just work, came home, and so forth. Thursday rolls around. I'm on the way home. I've had a long week. I'm going to stop in at Casey's. Casey's cost me $12.74. What I get, I don't know, maybe a sandwich and a drink, a couple lottery tickets. Not judging. I don't play the lottery, but I'm not judging here. So I stopped at Casey's. Well, again, do I have a category for miscellaneous? No. So I'm just going to go ahead and count that as grocery. That's totally your call. You make however whatever category you want for that. I just decided to. So now again, now my grocery budget now is 252.55, my bucket, and I just took another 12.74 out of it, which leaves me 239.81. So I'm going to change that to 239.81. That's what's left in my bucket. Well, it's the weekend again, almost, except, well, this was Thursday, the 27th. Now it's the 28th. 28th, we get another paycheck. I go look at the bank. That's correct, what we expected. Okay, good. That deposit happened. I highlight it so that I know that it happened. I need some gas on my other car on this day, so I'm just going to say we stopped at Shell, got some more gas. That was the 28th. Now, I'm not going to go through and describe every single transaction as I do it. I'm just going to be quiet for a minute, and I'm just going to work through these so you can see what I'm doing. So before I be quiet, I'm going to tell you this one. I'm going to deduct from my gas, which I had $148 left over in gas, and I just spent another $42.54, which leaves me with $105.46. Okay, now I'm just going to go through some transactions, and you can watch what I'm doing here. I feel like I should be playing some Jeopardy music or something. Okay, so I've gotten to the end of this week, the second week, so I'm now at the end of my pay period. As you can see, I've had some grocery expenses, I've had some gas expenses, I had a couple that maybe you're not real clear, McDonald's and snacks from Casey's. I just took those out of my household or my grocery budget. If you want to make a separate accounting for that, you're perfectly welcome to. I actually had an extra line here, so I'm going to take that out. But as I went through and used money from those buckets, I had to go up here and take it out. Now you can see I have money left. I didn't spend all of my grocery budget. I have 2803 left. I didn't spend all of my gas budget. I have $7 left. My utility budget, of course, I didn't spend all that because I have another utility bill to pay. But that is how I account for all of those. Now, also, what happened as we went along here, I was just doing the unscheduled. But I went in here probably on what I usually do is on the first day of the pay period, I just go in and schedule all these. So on Friday the 21st, I would have scheduled this to be paid. I would have scheduled both of those to be paid as well. So those all got scheduled to be paid. Now, on the very last day of the pay period, that's when I went up and did my savings transfers. Okay, so I moved $200 from my checking into my savings at the bank, and I moved 8333 again from my checking to my savings. And you can do that in one transaction if you wish. I like to separate them so that I know exactly what they were for. Now, we're not going to have any reserve funds in this pay period because everything's getting carried forward to the next one. In the next one, we will. But in this one, we won't. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that my orange color because I know I'm not going to reconcile that. These, you won't highlight those until we empty them, which means we'll carry them forward into the next. Now, before we build the next pay period, though, we got to go to our savings because we moved money. We moved 283.33 into these accounts. I put 200 into my emergency fund, so that now is 1,700, and I put 83.33 in my property tax fund. So now if I go look at my bank account, my savings account balance should be 1783.33 now. I'll tell you, every once in a while you go in there and you'll go, the bank says I have a little bit more. I have a $1.10 extra or something. Go in and see if you got an interest payment. The bank you'll get these tiny, ridiculously small interest payments on your savings accounts, and that's okay. You just need to make sure you add it to something. I usually just add it on to one of my reserve funds because who cares? It's a couple bucks at the most. So don't forget to do your savings transfers. And since we did those, I highlighted those yellow. Now, let's add the next pay period. We're not going to go all the way through the next pay period. We're just going to add it. We're going to move our budget buckets, and that's going to be the end for this video. When the next video, we'll jump into the second pay period. We'll go through and we'll see that we'll have some reserve fund money left over on our utilities, and I'll show you a couple other things that'll be new to that one. So to add a pay period, we're going to highlight these four, A through D. That's the width of our budget pay period. We're going to right click and say insert. Now you're going, why did you put it there instead of just adding it over to the right? The reason is because if I keep adding it to the right and to the right and to the right, by the time I get to my third or fourth pay period, I have to scroll and scroll and scroll to use it. And that's a pain. By the time you get 10 months in and you have 22 pay periods or 20 pay periods, then you're really constantly scrolling and it's a nightmare. I always keep the most current pay period all the way to the left, and I let these get bumped out to the right and to the right and so forth. You'll also see later when we do future transactions, when we do forecasting, I'll show you how to hide some of those pay periods so you don't actually see them unless you want to unhide them, but they're there so you can work ahead without crowding your budget. Okay, so we inserted those. Now we're going to go to our blank form. This is where our blank form comes into play. Before I do that, though, I'm going to go ahead and add that conditional formatting here. I'm not going to explain it as I go. You can follow along. You've already done it once. So we have greater than or equal to 0. We want to make sure we format that as fill, and that's going to be green. And then we're going to add a second format in here. For less than 0. And we want those to be red. And the reason I'm doing that here on the template is because I don't want to have to do that every single time. Now you see it turned green because our balance is less than or equal, or I'm sorry, is more than or equal to 0. So I'm going to highlight these four, and I'm going to right click and say copy. Click on your current, highlight these and right click and say paste. Just use that first option. Now we've pasted those in there. I'm going to do one other thing because I meant to grab an extra. Just put an extra, what am I trying to say? An extra blank column in there so you have them separate. The way you can do that, I didn't do that this time. Instead of highlighting 4 of those to insert, go ahead and highlight 5. Highlight all the way over to E before you do the insert, so it'll add that. When I do the next one, I'll highlight all 5 of those, and then I'll hit insert, and it'll insert all 5. I just forgot to do that. Now, I mentioned before, I like for my previous to be up here, so I'm going to put it up here. It's always going to be highlighted orange because there's no reconciling. Now, the previous is always going to be the end balance of your last pay period. So I'm going to make a reference here. I'm going to say equals, just equals, and then I'm going to left click once on here, and then enter. And now you can see that this balance carried forward. And if I click on there, it says that it's equal to F36. That's that cell. I'm going to do that every time. When I create my next pay period, I'm going to make that previous equal to what will be here. And it'll carry that forward and carry it forward. Now, you don't have to go and do it. What will happen if you try to do that by yourself with a calculator and whatever, you're going to mess it up. So I would not advise you to do that. There's another thing that I'll show you in the next video when we create the next pay period. That's a little bit of a shortcut. I kind of cheat in how I add these because I don't like to retype all that stuff. I'll show you how to do it. But let's put the date range for this pay period. The new one is going to start on 5/5. 2023, and it's going to go to 05/18, 2023. So the 18th then is the Thursday before the next pay period. This is Friday the 5th, so we'll have an income for that. We'll have the next income will be 7 days later and so forth. We're going to do this whole process here again, but I promise in the next video I'm going to show you a shortcut so you don't have to type in all this stuff every single time. There's 2 ways you can do it, but I will show you both ways. So first thing I want to do though is I want to get rid of these budget buckets, and that's all we're going to do for the rest of this video. I don't want those in there anymore. I need to carry them over here because that money is still there. I didn't spend it. I budgeted it, but I didn't spend it. So let's just copy those over there. Literally, we're going to highlight all 4 of those. We're going to right click and we're going to copy. Don't cut, copy it, and I'll show you why. Now we're going to highlight 3 of those. Right click and paste. Now we're going to go over here and make these 0 because we've moved them. There's no more balance there anymore. We've moved them over here. Now they exist over here. We're going to go here and highlight to reconcile because there's not going to ever be anything there. These will never show up on your bank statement. So you can see what happened is actually you ended up with more money than you thought at the end of the pay period because you didn't spend everything you budgeted for. We carried it over to here. In the next video, we'll talk about some decisions you can make, like what do I do with this extra $28 I have for groceries? What do I do with my extra $7 in gas? I can tell you, you have another utility bill to pay on the 15th, so you're going to use some of that, hopefully not all of it, but some of that utility money. Also, don't forget, when you copy from one pay period to the next, your dates are going to copy. So you're going to want to change these to the 5th so that they're correct. You're going to keep all this, you're still going to be tracked and so forth. If you want to get rid of these because you don't want the extra spaces, do not highlight the whole, don't highlight the whole line, because if you do that, look, you're going to get rid of that too. So if you want to get rid of these, just highlight these blank cells, right click, delete. It's going to ask you which direction do you want to move these. You're always going to want to move up. Don't do left because that's going to pull all this over to here. Just say up. Change it to up. And then it's just going to move it up for you. So that's where we're going to leave this video. When we do episode 5, we're going to do all this again. We're going to do all of our pay periods for whatever expenses occur between the 5th and the 18th. I'm going to show you how to do the reserve fund because in that next pay period, we're going to have a reserve fund. I'll show you how. And then I'll show you a quicker method of copying this in here so you don't have to retype all that. But for right now, we're going to go through the manual motion of typing all that. So I hope this has been helpful to show you how to get this going. We use a lot of formulas because we don't like to manually keep track of all this. When you manually keep track of stuff, you make mistakes. Mistakes will continue to happen. And if you make a mistake here and you get 10 months down the line, it's really hard to find it. So we use formulas, and that really works out well. So watch for the next video, episode 5, where we'll continue. And in future videos, we'll show you when things come up. What do you do? What do you do when you reach one of your savings goals, and all those good kinds of those things that just are part of the normal process. So watch the first 3 videos if you haven't to get set up. Get started in this video, get used to this color coordinating, or come up with your own something that visually I can just glance at this now and I can say, okay, everything that was supposed to happen in this pay period happened because it's all highlighted. So I paid or scheduled all of those, or they're reconciled. I know that that's a done deal. I don't have to do anything more with that. I have nice green balances, which tells me that they're greater than or equal to 0. Lots of easy and good visual cues for that. So we'll see you next time for episode 5. Thanks. Have a good day. Thanks for watching, and thanks to all of you who have supported SFM in the past. While we do not charge for our instructional videos, we do need your support to keep them free. Any amount from $5 to $10 if you found the video helpful, to $50 or $100 if you'd like to make a donation on behalf of those who can't, or any amount in between is greatly appreciated. You'll see here a few convenient ways to contribute, and every single bit helps to keep our mission going, including subscribing to the channel and sharing the videos, so please do that too. Until next time, remember to sacrifice while it's voluntary. Bless you all.